Herein we start Otho from Plutarch's Lives, translated by John Dryden, revised by Hugh Clough. The new emperor went early in the morning to the capital and sacrificed, and having commanded Marius Celsus to be brought, he saluted him, and with obliging language desired him rather to forget his accusation than remember his acquittal, to which Celsus answered neither meanly nor ungratefully, that his very crime ought to be recommending of his integrity, since his guilt had been his fidelity to Galba, from whom he had never received any personal obligations, upon which they were both of them admired by those that were present, and applauded by the soldiers. In the Senate, Otho said, much in a gentle and popular strain, he was to have been consul for part of that year himself, but he gave the office to Virginius Rufus, and displaced none that had been named for the consulship by either Nero or Galba. Those that were remarkable for their age and dignity he promoted to the priesthoods, and restored the remains of their fortunes that had not yet been sold to all those senators that were banished by Nero and were called by Galba, so that the nobility and chief of the people, who were at first apprehensive that no human creature but some supernatural or penal vindictive power had seized the empire, began now to flatter themselves with hopes of a government that smiled upon them thus early. Besides, nothing gratified or gained the whole Roman people more than his justice in relation to Tigellinus. It was not seen how he was, in fact, already suffering punishment, not only by the very terror of retribution which he saw the whole city requiring as a just debt, but with several incurable diseases also, not to mention those unhallowed, frightful excesses among impure and prostitute women, to which, at the very close of life, his lewd nature clung, and in them gasped out, as it were, at last, these, in the opinion of all reasonable men, being themselves the extremest punishment, and equal to many deaths. Yeah, you gotta watch out for consequences, whether a person is paying for these things or getting them free. But it was felt like a grievous people in general that he continued yet to see the light of day, who had been the occasion of the loss of it to so many persons, and such persons as had died by his means. Wherefore Otho ordered him to be sent for, just as he was contriving his escape by means of some vessels that lay ready for him on the coast near where he lived, in the neighborhood of Sinaessa. At first he endeavored to corrupt the messenger by a large sum of money to favor his design, but when he found this was to no purpose, he made him as considerable a present as if he had really connived at it, only entreating him to stay till he had shaved, and so took that opportunity, and with his razor dispatched himself. And while giving the people this most righteous satisfaction of their desires for himself, he seemed to have no sort of regard for any private injuries of his own. And at first, to please the populace, he did not refuse to be called Nero in the theatre, and did not interfere when some persons displayed Nero's statues to public view. And Clavius Rufus says, imperial letters, such as are sent with couriers, went into Spain with the name of Nero affixed adoptively to that of Otho, but as soon as he perceived this gave offense to the chief and most distinguished citizens, it was omitted. After he had begun to model the government in this manner, the paid soldiers began to murmur and endeavored to make him suspect and chastise the nobility, either really out of a concern for his safety or wishing upon this pretense to stir up trouble and warfare. Thus was Crispinus, whom he had ordered to bring him the 17th cohort from Ostia, began to collect what he wanted after it was dark, and was putting the arms upon the wagons. Some of the most turbulent cried out that Crispinus was disaffected, that the Senate was practicing something against the emperor, and that those arms were to be employed against Caesar and not for him. When this report was once set afoot, it got the belief and excited the passions of many. They broke out into violence, some seized the wagons, and others slew Crispinus and 2 centurions that opposed them, and the whole number of them arrayed themselves in their arms, and encouraging one another to stand by Caesar, marched to Rome. And hearing that 80 of the senators were at supper with Otho, they flew into the palace and declared it was a fair opportunity to take off Caesar's enemies at one stroke. A general alarm ensued of an immediate coming sack of the city. All were in confusion about the palace, and Otho himself in no small consternation, being only concerned